Imagine taking a vacation in a secluded place, far from the chaos of the city, a perfect getaway to relax with friends. But what if, when you arrived, you felt something was wrong? Noises in the night, doors creaking alone, and the constant feeling that they are not alone. That's exactly what happened to a group of friends, and what was supposed to be an unforgettable trip turned into a true nightmare. If you've ever had that strange feeling of being watched, this story will give you goosebumps. But be careful. You might think twice before traveling somewhere far away again. Let's go to the first story. The Forgotten Cottage, Vacation, that turned into a nightmare. The dirt road seemed endless, cutting through dense forest and plunged into almost absolute darkness. The silence was disturbing, broken only by the sound of tires crunching against the earth and dry leaves blown by the cold night wind. The group of friends, Lucas, Mariana, Rafael, and Juliana, were eager to finally arrive at the rented chalet for the weekend. The idea was simple: escape the stress of the city, disconnect from the world, and enjoy nature. But as the car moved further down the winding road, a strange feeling began to settle between them. "Are you sure we're on the right path?" Mariana asked, watching the increasingly oppressive darkness in the rearview mirror. "The GPS is saying it's not long." "About 10 minutes more," Lucas replied, trying to maintain a calm tone, although he felt a slight discomfort. After a few minutes, the trees began to part, and finally the cabin appeared before them. It was an old building, with dark wood and dusty windows, as if it had been abandoned for a long time. The light from the car's headlights illuminated the facade and revealed a wooden porch with a rocking chair standing, or almost standing still. One detail caught everyone's attention. The chair moved smoothly, as if someone had just gotten out of it. "It must be the wind," muttered Rafael, forcing a smile. Juliana, the most sensitive of the group, hugged her own arms, feeling a shiver run down her spine. Something about that place felt wrong, but she tried to ignore the feeling. Lucas turned off the car and everyone got out, grabbing their bags and heading to the entrance. The door was unlocked, which was strange, as the owner had said he would. Leave the key under the rug. The interior of the cabin was rustic but cozy, an unlit fireplace, aged wooden furniture, and old paintings on the walls. The smell of damp wood and dust hung in the air. "Well, at least it looks comfortable," said Mariana, trying to ease the tension. But when Rafael closed the door behind them, a bang echoed through the house, as if something or someone had moved inside. The group looked at each other in silence. "It must be the old wood creaking," Lucas whispered, trying not to show his discomfort. They didn't know it yet, but that night would be much longer than they expected. The first hour at the chalet was peaceful. They lit the fireplace, opened a few bottles of wine, and tried to get into a relaxing mood. Little by little, the initial discomfort disappeared. Mariana and Juliana were preparing something to eat in the kitchen, while Lucas and Rafael played cards in the living room. The old wooden floors creaked under their steps, but that was to be expected in such an old cabin. However, as the night progressed and the surrounding forest fell into a deep silence, small noises began to stand out. At first, they were almost imperceptible, as if it were the wind passing through the trees. But then something changed. A loud crack came from upstairs. Everyone froze for a second, exchanging glances. "Did you hear that?" Juliana asked, her voice a little shaky. "It must be an animal on the roof. This place is in the middle of the forest. It's normal," Lucas replied, trying to remain calm. Mariana forced a smile and went back to stirring the pan, but a second noise made her body freeze. It no longer looked like something on the roof. It looked like a step, slow, spaced out, as if someone was walking upstairs. This time, Rafael dropped his cards on the table. Okay, that was definitely a step. The silence that followed was deafening. Everyone was attentive, holding their breath, trying to hear anything else. but for long seconds, nothing happened. "Shall we check?" Lucas suggested, although his voice didn't show much confidence. "Are you crazy?" Juliana whispered, approaching him. "What if there is someone there?" "There's no one, Ju. The door was open when we arrived, remember? It could just be an animal that got in before us." Mariana looked at the stairs. It led to 2 bedrooms and a small bathroom. The lights were off up there, making it impossible to see anything beyond the first few steps. That's when it happened. A loud thump came from upstairs, as if something large had fallen to the floor. Juliana screamed and dropped the glass she was holding, the glass shattering on the floor. Raphael grabbed a flashlight and reluctantly pointed it at the stairs. The beam of light danced across the wooden walls, revealing the dusty steps. But there was nothing there. No movement, no shadow. "I don't like this," Mariana murmured, hugging her own body. The group stood still for a moment, waiting for something else to happen, but the silence returned, heavy and suffocating. "Let's sleep," Lucas said, forcing a calm tone. It must have just been the wood settling in the cold. No one responded, but everyone knew that that night would not be easy to get through. The night was long and restless. Every little noise from the cabin made the group hold their breath, their hearts racing with every creak of the old wood. No one slept well, but somehow the dawn brought a little relief. The daylight made it seem like the previous night's events hadn't been that scary after all. Mariana was the first to go down to the kitchen, determined to prepare a strong coffee and forget the scares of the previous night. The smell of freshly brewed coffee soon spread throughout the room, bringing a bit of comfort. "Good morning," Juliana murmured, yawning as she went down the stairs. But the moment of tranquility was short-lived. "Hey, has anyone seen my backpack?" Raphael asked, looking around. "You didn't leave her in the room," Lucas asked. "Yes, but it's not here." Everyone started looking through sofas, corners, and even the car. Nothing. "That doesn't make sense." Mariana grumbled. "Are you sure you brought it?" "Of course, my cell phone was inside it." The discomfort from the night before returned, spreading throughout the room. The idea that someone could have entered the cabin without them noticing made them even more nervous. It was then that Juliana noticed something strange in the corner of the room, near the stairs. There were footprints on the floor. But the scary detail was that they didn't belong to any of them. They were small footprints, barefoot and dirty, as if a child had walked there during the night. Silence settled in the cabin. The air seemed to grow heavier. This can't be real," Mariana murmured, her voice almost breaking. It was Lucas who broke the silence. "I think we'd better take a look upstairs." No one wanted to go up, but the feeling that something was wrong was too strong to ignore. With hesitant steps, they advanced up the stairs, the steps creaking beneath their feet. The hallway seemed darker than they remembered. The air there was cold, almost freezing, and that's when they saw it. The door to the last room, which had been locked the night before, was now ajar. Lucas took courage and slowly pushed the door open. The room was small and simple, with a bed covered in a dusty sheet and an old dresser in the corner. But what made everyone hold their breath was what was on the floor, right in the center of the room. Raphael's backpack, open, and next to her, a dirty and torn teddy bear. "But what is this?" Juliana whispered, instinctively moving away. It was then that they realized something even worse. On the opposite wall, scratched in shaky, uneven letters, was a sentence written in what looked like charcoal. "He never left." Everyone's blood ran cold. A shiver ran down their spines. Who wrote that? And who was he? It was at that moment that a crack sounded behind them, the sound of a small bare foot touching the floor. And for a brief second, a childish laugh echoed through the hallway. The sound of children's laughter froze the group. It was a low, muffled laugh, but filled with something wrong. Lucas turned around first, eyes wide, trying to find the source of the sound. The hallway, previously just dark, now seemed even narrower, as if the shadows had taken on a life of their own. "He arrives! We need to get out of here, now!" Raphael was the first to say what everyone already felt. Mariana grabbed Juliana's hand, pulling her back, while Lucas and Raphael ran ahead. The group ran down the stairs so fast they almost tripped. The creaking of the steps seemed louder, as if the entire house was echoing their every step. But when they arrived in the room, something was different. The front door was closed, and not just closed, the latch was locked. "No, it can't be." Raphael tried to turn the handle hard, but nothing happened. Lucas pulled the key out of his pocket and tried to put it in the lock, but it seemed like something had blocked the hole. Someone locked it from the inside. Panic began to take over. Mariana ran to the windows, but they were all jammed. Juliana tried to pry them open, but it looked like they had been nailed from the inside out. That's when they heard the footsteps. Small steps, barefoot. The sound was coming from upstairs. 1, 2, 3 slow steps down the stairs. The air in the room became heavy, cold. Juliana began to cry softly, squeezing Mariana's arm tightly. Raphael, with shaking hands, picked up a ceramic vase from the table and prepared to throw it at the door. But before he could do anything, no, 3 soft knocks on the wood of the front door. The sound did not come from outside. It came from inside the house. Someone or something was there with them. Everyone's breath caught in their throats. Lucas took a step, aback, eyes wide, staring at the door as if it would open at any moment. That's when Mariana saw the reflection in the window, a figure, small, standing in the middle of the room between them and the door. She tried to scream, but her voice just wouldn't come out, and then the lights flickered. 1, 2, and on the third blink, everything went dark. When the lights came back on, the cabin seemed to have completely changed. The walls were covered in small handprints, as if dozens of children had walked past, leaving trails of dirt and what looked like dried blood. The group, paralyzed, looked around, unable to process what was happening. It was then that Lucas realized. On the floor, in the very center of the room, was an old photo. He took it with shaking hands, and everyone came closer to look. In the photo, a group of children smiled in front of the same chalet. They wore period clothes, with an old and almost theatrical look. But what chilled everyone's blood was the detail in the background of the image. A shadowy figure with an indefinite face stood in the cottage window, observing. Mariana started to back away, covering her mouth to keep from screaming. "This can't be real," he whispered, while tears ran down his face. At that moment, the front door, which had previously been locked, slowly opened, with a creak that echoed throughout the room. The cold air that came in seemed to carry whispers, barely audible. Voices calling out to them. Raphael took a hesitant step toward the door, but Lucas held him back. "No, we can't leave now. Something is waiting outside." And then the childish voice sounded again, now very close. "You can't leave. Ever." The lights flickered once more, and the entire cabin seemed to vibrate, as if the walls were breathing. The last thing the group saw before everything was plunged into darkness was the figure in the photo, materializing in the room, arms outstretched, as if inviting them to join the children. The next morning, the cabin was empty. No sign of the group of friends. Only the old photo remained in the center of the room, now with new faces, theirs. The most isolated place is not always the safest. Sometimes what's hiding in the shadows can change your life, or simply steal it from you. If you like stories that challenge your sanity and leave your heart racing, then this is just the beginning. Like the video, subscribe to the channel, and activate the bell so you don't miss the next stories that will keep you up at night, because here fear has no end, and neither do you want it to. Until next time, if you dare. Let's go to the second story, The Cottage of the Dark Past. Imagine that you and your friends find the perfect cabin for your vacation. Isolated, peaceful, and surrounded by nature. Sounds like the ideal getaway, doesn't it? But what if, as night falls, that paradise starts to reveal dark secrets? What if laughter turns to screams and what seemed like just a legend becomes real? In this frightening story, you will discover that not all resting places are safe. Prepare to face fear, because this night could be your last. Want to know what happened? Stay with me until the end and find out. The car slowly climbed the dirt road, surrounded by trees that seemed to bow under the weight of silence. The late afternoon light colored the sky orange and red, creating an almost surreal contrast with the dark green of the forest. Ina, Pedro, Lucas, and Mariana were laughing in the car, talking about how they would finally have a peaceful weekend away from the city. "It's here," said Pedro, pointing to a worn wooden sign that read, Chalet do Valle. It was a small detour in the road that led to a clearing. As soon as the car turned, everyone fell silent. There was the cottage, and he really was perfect, at least at first glance. The construction was rustic, but charming. Well-kept wood, a porch with rocking chairs, and a fireplace that seemed to invite cozy evenings around the fireplace. Beside it, a small stream flowed lazily, producing a soothing sound. In the background, the mountains stood like sentinels, giving a feeling of total isolation. "Didn't I say it would be incredible?" said Pedro, getting out of the car and stretching his arms. Ana smiled, but inside she felt a shiver that she couldn't explain. There was something about the silence, in that place, that felt heavy, almost suffocating. Maybe it was the contrast with the hustle and bustle of the city, she thought. After all, I wasn't used to so much stillness. While Lucas and Mariana unloaded their bags, Ana walked to the porch. As soon as he placed his foot on the first step, he felt the floor creak in a serious way, like a long, deep sigh. She laughed at herself for being scared by something so silly. "It's just an old cottage," he muttered. Inside, the cabin was even more impressive. The living room had a large stone fireplace, comfortable armchairs, and a bookshelf full of dusty books. There was also an old grandfather clock in the corner, which looked like it had been sitting for years. The smell of wood, mixed with the fresh forest air, created a welcoming atmosphere. Everything was exactly as on the website where they booked. But, looking closely, Ana noticed that some details were not in the description, like the nail marks on the wall next to the kitchen door or the mirrors covered with white sheets. "This is incredible," Mariana exclaimed, taking a photo with her cell phone. "No one will believe we found a place so cheap and so beautiful." "I just hope the internet works," Lucas joked, as he plugged his cell phone into the portable charger. Pedro, always the most curious of the group, began to explore the rooms. He climbed the wooden stairs that led to the bedrooms, and for a moment the sound of his footsteps echoed in an almost ghostly way throughout the house. "The rooms are huge!" he shouted from upstairs. Everything seemed perfect, but Ana couldn't relax. Something in the air felt off. Maybe it was the way the surrounding trees seemed closer than they really were, or how the sunlight quickly disappeared, leaving the shadows to grow. Or maybe it was just the fact that, as cozy as the cottage seemed, she had a feeling they weren't alone. As night fell, the lights in the house were turned on, and the group gathered in the living room with drinks and a board game. The sound of laughter finally broke the tense atmosphere that Ana had felt since they arrived. For a brief moment, she was convinced it was just paranoia. After all, the place really was a perfect getaway. However, as he looked out the window, he saw something that made his stomach go cold, a figure among the trees. stop, motionless. When she blinked, the figure was no longer there. It must have been my imagination, he thought, trying to shake off his fear. After all, the cottage was perfect, wasn't it? Night seemed to have settled heavily upon the cottage. The once bright full moon was now hidden behind dense clouds, and the wind rustled the trees outside, producing a sound that seemed like a constant whisper. Inside, the group tried to keep the atmosphere light, laughing and playing cards. But Anna, always restless, couldn't concentrate. The image of that figure among the trees never left his head. "Guys, don't you think it's too quiet here?" Anna asked, suddenly interrupting the conversation. Pedro let out a laugh. "Silence is exactly what we came for, Anna. Isn't that what you wanted? Stay away from the madness of the city," he replied, not paying much attention to her worried tone. Suddenly there was a sound coming from the door. 3 firm, dry beats. Knock, knock, knock. Everyone froze. Lucas was the first to break the silence. "Are you waiting for someone?" "Of course not," replied Pedro, getting up from the sofa. "They must be the neighbors from the other cabin or something." "Pedro, don't open it," said Anna, feeling a shiver run down her spine. Something about that beat felt off. It was too late for anyone to be visiting, and the cabin was so isolated that they didn't even know if there were other cabins nearby. Pedro ignored the warning and approached the door. He looked through the peephole and saw only 2 figures. "There are people outside. They look like a couple. They probably got lost or need help." "Don't open it," Anna insisted, but Pedro was already turning the handle. When the door opened, 2 figures appeared in the dim porch light. They were, in fact, a couple, or at least they seemed to be. The man was tall, in a black suit that looked old, like something out of a 1920s movie. The woman, shorter, wore a long dress and had a white scarf covering her hair. Both of their faces looked strange, as if something didn't quite fit. Perhaps it was their excessive paleness or the way their eyes never seemed to blink. "Sorry to bother you, but we are lost. Our car broke down on the road and we saw the light from the cabin. Can we come in for a moment?" asked the man in a deep, cold voice that seemed to echo. Pedro hesitated for a moment. There was something about their presence that seemed unsettling, but he pulled himself together. "Sure, come in. It must be freezing out there." Anna felt her stomach drop as the 2 strangers walked through the door. They walked slowly, with almost ceremonial steps. Mariana, always friendly, tried to break the ice. "You must have been scared, right? This road is not easy." "It's an old road," replied the woman with a slight smile that didn't seem to reach her eyes. "Many travelers have passed through it." They sat on the couch, but the discomfort in the air was almost palpable. The man observed the room with an intense gaze, as if he were analyzing every detail. The woman, on the other hand, seemed to be staring at Anna, which made her look away nervously. Lucas, trying to lighten the mood, offered a cup of coffee, but the couple politely declined. "We don't drink coffee," the man said, with an intonation that made the phrase sound more like a threat than an answer. The conversation was brief and strangely formal. The couple said little about themselves, avoiding direct questions. When asked where they came from, the woman simply replied, "From a very far-away place." "But we've been here before." Anna, increasingly uncomfortable, whispered to Pedro, "They are strange. Something is wrong. We need to ask them to leave." Before Pedro could respond, the man suddenly stood up. "Thank you for the hospitality," he said, "but we better go. We don't want to bother you." He extended his hand to the woman, who followed him without saying another word. As soon as they walked through the door, the woman turned her face one last time to the group and smiled, a smile so empty and disconcerting that it made Anna shudder. Pedro closed the door, trying to hide his discomfort. Everything is fine now. They left, but Anna knew that something was far from right. As he looked at the ground, he noticed wet marks that the 2 strangers had left behind. But they weren't normal footprints. They looked like mud, marks mixed with blood. Without saying anything, Anna walked away from the door and faced Pedro. Do you really think they were just a lost couple? Because I think something terrible just entered and left this house. Silence reigned in the cabin after the strangers left. Anna still felt a strange chill running down her spine, as if something invisible was still there. She looked at the ground once again, observing those wet footprints that seemed to mix mud and blood. But when he blinked, they were already dry, as if they had never existed. Mariana tried to break the tense atmosphere. Guys, it was just an odd couple. They are already gone. Let's forget about it and enjoy the trip, shall we? Lucas laughed awkwardly. Yes, of course. Just a strange couple who appeared out of nowhere with clothes straight out of an old movie, who don't blink and refuse coffee. Normal. Pedro sighed and started to lock the door. The important thing is that they left. Now let's go to sleep. Tomorrow we'll laugh about it. Anna didn't respond. Something inside her said it wasn't over. Before going to the rooms, Mariana noticed something in the armchair next to the fireplace. Hey, someone forgot a notebook here. It was an aged leather-bound journal with a leather strap wrapped around it to keep it closed. It was there, as if it had been placed on purpose. Pedro took the diary and examined it. It must be from a previous guest. Maybe it fell under the sofa and we only saw it now. But Anna approached slowly, feeling a wave of anxiety rising within her. Was that there before? I don't remember seeing it, Mariana replied, biting her lip. Lucas took the diary from Pedro's hands and untied the leather strap. The pages were yellowed, some stained with what looked like water, or something worse. He began to read aloud. October 25th, 1979. The couple arrived at nightfall. They knocked on the door, asking for shelter, saying they were lost. We let them in, and it was our biggest mistake. Lucas stopped reading. The entire cabin seemed to have become even colder. Pedro laughed nervously. Okay, this must be a prank. Someone must have left it there to scare the guests. Lucas swallowed and continued. They seemed normal at first, but something about them was wrong. They didn't blink, they didn't eat, they just watched us. When we asked where they came from, they said, from a very far place, but we've been here before. The room fell into absolute silence. Mariana covered her mouth with her hand. That's exactly what they said to us, Anna whispered, feeling her heart race. Lucas turned the page, but the writing from then on was shaky, almost illegible, as if whoever wrote was in despair. At 3 in the morning, they came back. They were at the door, looking inside. The man smiled and said, "Now we can enter without asking permission." Lucas stopped reading and looked at his friends. This is a joke, right? This can't be real. Pedro swallowed hard and looked at the door. I think we better lock everything up. Anna looked at her watch. The hand showed 2:55 in the morning. It was 5 minutes to 3. The tension in the cabin was unbearable. Each of the 4 friends felt as if the air had become heavier, almost suffocating. The temperature seemed to have dropped, and a cold wind began to blow through the cracks in the windows, even though there was no sign of a storm outside. Anna couldn't take her eyes off the clock on the wall. The clock approached 3 o'clock in the morning, and with each second that passed, the dread inside her grew. This is crazy. We shouldn't have read that diary, he murmured, hugging his own arms as if to protect himself. Mariana tried to appear calm, but her voice was shaking. This is just a coincidence, guys. It's a made-up story, that's all. There's nothing wrong here. Pedro didn't seem so sure about that. He was standing by the door, making sure it was securely locked. If this is a joke, it's gone beyond the limit. We should get out of here, now. And go where? Lucas countered, lifting the diary as if it were proof that there was no escape. You read what was here. They said they came back at 3 in the morning. And us? Are we just going to pretend nothing happened with 3 minutes to go? A violent crash shook the front door. Everyone froze. The sound was heavy, as if something huge had crashed into the wood. Who is it?" Pedro shouted, trying to sound brave, but his voice betrayed the fear he felt. Nobody responded. Another blow echoed, this time louder. The door seemed to be being tested, forced, as if someone outside was impatient to enter. Lucas stepped back, still holding the diary, and began quickly leafing through it. There has to be something here, some explanation, some way to stop this. Mariana held Ana by the arm. "We need to leave. Through the window, anything. We can't stay here and wait for the worst." Ana shook her head, desperate. What if they're already out there, if we are surrounded? The clock on the wall chimed 3 o'clock. At the same moment, all the lights in the chalet went out. Darkness took over, swallowing everything. Only the dim light of the moon, which came through the windows, dimly illuminated the room. No, Lucas muttered, trying to turn on his cell phone's flashlight, but the device wouldn't turn on. The others did the same, and none of the cell phones worked anymore. It was then that the silence became unbearable. The wind stopped blowing, and the sound of their own hearts beating in their ears was all they could hear. "They're here," Ana whispered, tears streaming down her face. Suddenly, the sound of footsteps echoed outside. Slow, shuffling steps, as if whoever was out there was enjoying every moment. The door handle turned slowly. "But I locked it," Pedro shouted, retreating to the middle of the room. The door opened with a slow, agonizing creak, revealing the silhouettes of 2 figures. It was the couple they had seen earlier. But now, there was something grotesque about them. Their faces were too pale, their eyes were completely black like bottomless pits, and a cruel smile distorted their mouths. "You let us in," said the man, with a voice that seemed to echo inside their minds. Mariana shouted, and the couple took a step forward. Before anyone could react, the chalet's windows opened by themselves with a bang, and a terrible wind invaded the place. Objects were thrown everywhere, and the walls seemed to shake. Pedro tried to run towards the back door, but as soon as he got close, something invisible forcefully pulled him back. He was thrown against the wall, and a scream of pain escaped his mouth before he passed out. Lucas, desperate, began to recite out loud what was written in the diary, hoping that it would help. "Please work! For the love of God, work!" But the words seemed to anger the couple even more. The woman raised her hand, and the diary flew out of Lucas's hands, catching fire in the air. Ana and Mariana clung to each other, crying. "Please! What do you want from us?" Ana shouted. The man gave an even more disturbing smile. "We already said, we come from a very far place, but we have been here before." The lights began to flash frantically, and the figures took another step towards their friends. The last thing they heard was the sound of the door closing behind them and darkness taking over everything. And then, silence. Nothing else was found in the cabin that night. When the first rays of sunlight touched the forest, the cabin was completely silent. No sound of birds, no rustling of trees in the wind. It was as if the night before had sucked all the life out of that place. The police arrived early after a desperate call from the chalet owner, who was surprised by the absolute silence. When they entered, they found the place intact, but empty. There was no sign of the 4 friends. Their belongings were there, their suitcases untouched, their cell phones on the table. But of them, no trace. The burned diary was still on. The floor, the pages singed like scars from a story that should never have been read. What happened to them? Where did they go? Had they really crossed over to the other side, like the cabin's former residents? The truth is that some places hold secrets that should never be discovered, and some stories should never be told. Now tell me, have you ever been to a place that seemed unlike anything else, where the silence felt too loud, where something in the back of your mind told you to get out of there immediately? Maybe maybe some horror stories aren't just stories. If you like this story and want more disturbing and real stories, don't forget to like, subscribe to the channel, and activate the bell so you don't miss anything. Here, fear never sleeps. And you may not be able to after this either. See you in the next video, if you're still here.